Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. In this video, we will be talking about matching in AI. In the previous session, we discussed about various knowledge representation issues and we also talked about propositional logic as well as first order logic and how we can use those in various examples in order to derive knowledge. So basically, when we talk about logic, it is representation of knowledge, and once we have represented those information or those facts, we are supposed to match the given condition in order to find out the appropriate solution. So, talking about matching, if we are considering matching here, so matching can be defined as the process of using search to solve problems as an application of appropriate rules as an application of appropriate rules. So, if we look carefully into this particular definition, we will understand there are two major terminologies which are associated with definition. First, it is that we will be using search, and second, we have to understand that we definitely need to have appropriate rules based on which we can use those that search in order to solve the problem. The next important point which we have to remember while considering matching is that they generate new states. They generate new states that can be using various approaches like deduction or induction or analogy or resolution. So all those rules of inferences we can use so that it we are capable of generating new states to which the same rules or new rules could be applied until the solution is found. Now, talking about search, we do not have to just focus on one single search, but we have to go ahead with a more clever search. So, traditional search is generally not preferred when we are considering a solution to a problem in AI. We have to opt for clever search. So, if we are considering clever search are those searches from which chooses the appropriate rule within the defined rules which can be applied at a particular point and which are likely to lead to a solution. So if we are considering clever search, we have a domain of search. Okay, we have a domain of rules, and this is the set of rules that we have, and based on this set of rules we have to find out, rightly identify that those particular rules which are likely to lead us to a solution instead of depending on the entire set of rules. Okay, so we have to opt for clever search. But in order to find out clever search or the most appropriate rules, we have to formulate a strategy. Okay, so how can we find out a clever search? Okay, so in order to find out the clever search, we have to do some kind of matching between the current state and the preconditions of the rules. So the solution lies that if we are able to match the current state and some precondition rules, okay, so precondition rules, we will be able to identify the right search strategy which would likely to lead us to a solution. Now, for the success of a rule-based system, there is a process. Okay, if we are considering these rules, so let us consider the rule-based system, and in order to have a successful rule-based system, what do we have to understand? We have to understand that there are certain steps which are involved. The first one is indexing. So when indexing in general means that we are associating a sequence or a number to the already associated preconditions. So in indexing, we will compare each of the preconditions to the current state and extract the ones that match. So suppose there are rule 1, rule 2, rule 3, and we have a precondition here. So if we are having a precondition here at each of these rules or each of these preconditions are um, matched against the rules which are there, and these preconditions are again in turn matched with the current state. So in this process, the current state basically is matched with each of the preconditions which are available, and it will extract only those ones which match. Maybe the current state uh, matches with R2, so R2 would be selected. Now there are certain problems associated with this. What can be the problem? So, or the disadvantage. So if you are considering the disadvantage, the first disadvantages is large number of rules. So if we have large number of rules, then scanning through each one of them can be extremely inefficient. So here, since we have 3 rules only, it was easier for us to match against the current state. Now if there were hundreds of rules, it would take a lot of time. So hence it is not very efficient. The next important problem is that it is not always immediately obvious whether a rule's preconditions are satisfied by a particular state, right? So not obvious, or it is not very clear whether whether a rule's precondition are satisfied by a particular state. So these two are the disadvantages which could come up uh, due to indexing process. Okay, so what can be the possible solution? The possible solution can be, we can use the current state as an index to the rules and select the matching ones immediately. Okay, so here instead of focusing more on the rules, we will be focusing more on the current state as an index to the rules, and then we will select the matching ones immediately. Okay, so the next one is matching with variables. So the second step, or the second process, if we consider for rule based system, we have another step involved here, which is matching with variables. So when we are talking about matching with variables, it is useful when preconditions are not stated as exact descriptions of the preconditions, but rather describes the properties that it must have. So it can be used if the preconditions properties are described. So instead of having a set or definite or exact descriptions of the preconditions, we will simply associate properties, um, the the properties that the preconditions must have. So this kind of process is useful for that kind of scenario. The next important thing is unification, which is one of the rules of inference. Unification does not work here. We cannot use, does not work here. So we will not be able to use unification. The third one is that basically it is useful for many matching problems. So we can use in many relationships. Suppose we have many states which needs to be matched, so we can use we can use matching with the variables. And one possible example for this is a RETI algorithm. So this is a very famous algorithm which is used for matching with variables, and it is used for many matching algorithm. It is used for many relation matching problems. Okay. The next one, uh, the next point that we will be discussing is complex and approximate matching. But before that, let us first just make a brief note about what is this RETI algorithm efficiency resources or efficiency sources. How does this RETI algorithm work, or what are the properties of RETI algorithm? So we will discuss RETI algorithm efficiency sources. So when we are considering this RETI algorithm efficiency sources, the first one is the temporal nature of data. So temporal nature of data. So under this, if we are considering that rules do not alter the state description radically, we have to consider that point. Okay, rules may add or delete one or two, but never change the state description. Now, RETI maintains a network of rule conditions and uses the changes in the state descriptions to determine new rules which might be applied. Okay, the next important point that we have to discuss is structural similarity in rules. Structural similarity in rules. Here, RETI stores the rules so that they can share the structures in the memory. For example, rules for identifying wild animals. So if we are considering rules which will identify the wild animals, that means they live in the forest. So, and let's say they have uh, a long tail, or let's say they have such other properties which are associated for wild animal category. Okay, so those rules, they basically form a structure in the memory, and that structure can be utilized again and again. The structural similarity can be exploited severely in using the RETI algorithm. Okay, first one is it will never change the state description. It may add or delete one or two rules. Okay, but it will never change the state description. And the second one is it maintains a structural similarity in rules. That means the same rule can be used as the rules for a particular category or for a particular problem can be used as a structure in the memory, and that structure can be utilized by other instances. And the third important point is persistence in variable, persistence in variable binding. So here what happens is RETI remembers the previous calculations and is able to merge new binding information efficiently. Right? So this is all about the RETI algorithm efficiency sources. The third important process or the third important step which we need to discuss is complex and approximate matching. So complex and approximate matching. Now let us look into the third important process of rule-based systems. So first of all, the first point under this particular topic is that if the preconditions approximately match the current situation. So here we have a lot of approximations done, and if approximately the preconditions matches the current situation, approximately the preconditions matches the current situation, so we can consider it under this particular matching technique or matching process. Then it is used in situation which generally involve physical descriptions of the world. Physical descriptions of the world, example, speech recognition in different between different people or different unknown people. So physical descriptions of the of the world. And the third one is approximate matching is difficult to deal with because it increases the number of rules. Since we are going on using a different amount of approximations here, so it increases a lot of, it increases the, sorry, it increases the number of rules. Okay, so more the number of approximations, the more will be the rules. One example or one algorithm which uses this kind of approximations is ELIZA. So ELIZA-like rules are used. So let us look into how ELIZA-like rules are. So if we are considering ELIZA, so ELIZA-like rules, sorry, ELIZA-like rules. So let us consider some of the examples of how ELIZA-like rule looks like. So suppose I have something like X, me, Y. Okay, so it will have something like X, U, Y. Okay, then I remember X. Here it will be like, why do you remember X just now? Okay, so maybe the next one would be, my family member is Y. So here maybe the precondition may be, who else in your family is Y. Then let's say the current situation is again X family member Y. Then um, it, the precondition here might be, tell me more about your family, right? So X, me, Y. So this might be the current situation. So the precondition may be X, U, Y. Suppose I have another current situation is, I remember X. It might be having, it can be matched against a precondition like, why do you remember X just now? Similarly, my family member is Y. It can be matched against who else in your family is Y, right? So these are some of the some of the current states based on which some of the preconditions are approximated, and we can use this. Okay, now suppose another example could be, the user might be in the current state which is saying that my brother is mean to me. So ELIZA like rules could be, who else in your family is mean to you, or tell me more about your family. So these kind of preconditions could be matched against the current situation which is, my brother is mean to me. Okay, the indexes are matched, not the entire sentence here. And a single rule can match a large number of sentences, like, who else is in your family. So if we are considering this particular precondition, this particular rule, then it might be matched against, my family member is Y. Okay, so my cousin is Y, my brother is Y, my sister is Y. So all, a lot of sentences could be matched against just one precondition or one rule, which is, who else in your family is Y. Or suppose I have a rule saying that, tell me more about your family. So it could be X is a family member of Y. And then you can have another sentence which says that my father is 50 years old, or my mother is 60 years old, or let's say my brother is goes to the school. So all these are about your family. So a large number of sentences could be matched against just one single rule which we have used in ELIZA. Okay, now the major strength about ELIZA is that it says something fairly reasonable almost every time. We will get almost nearly correct answer every time, but it is, the understanding is superficial. That means it might go astray also. Okay, suppose, who else in your family is Y. This can also be matched against a sentence saying that um, why likes to eat apples. Okay, so that can also be a sentence which why likes to eat apples, which can be matched against this particular rule. So again, then apples are red in color, then apples, we get apples for 80 rupees per kg. So all those things are actually different sentences which are derived from just one single rule, which was who else in your family is why. So the understanding is very very superficial and it can lead the user to go astray, but definitely it says something fairly almost every time, because the first time it said that why likes to eat apples, that means it has some context to the family, some context to your family. Okay, that means why has some context to your family, only because of that that particular rule has been matched against that particular sentence. So major strength is, so let me write it down here. So strength is, it says fairly reasonable, fairly reasonable almost every time. But what is the weakness? The weakness on the other hand is, it can lead the user go astray. That means it can deviate from the main topic of discussion. Okay, so this was the third important point which we discussed. The next one, the next step in rule based system what we will be discussing is conflict resolution. Now this is an extremely important step which is there in rule based systems. Okay, so conflict resolution is basically we have to resolve conflicts between the rules. So it is, decision is basically based on matching process. Definitely the decision has to be based on the matching process. Now there are three basic approaches to conflict resolution. The first one is that we will be assigning a preference, assign a preference based on the rule, based on the rule that is matched, that is matched. So we will be assigning a preference based on the rule which is matched. Next we will be assigning a preference based on the object which is matched. So initially we have to consider the rule, then the object, and the third important matching we have to do here in conflict resolution is that we have to assign a preference based on the action that the matched rule would perform. So assign a preference based on the action that the matched rule would perform, would perform. Right. So these are the three steps which we have to understand while we are going for conflict resolution in matching. Okay. So when we are considering preference based on rules, first thing let us discuss about the first one, that is preference based on rules. Okay. So when we are considering preference based on rules, priority is given in the order, priority is given in the order in which they occur. Okay, priority is given in the order in which they occur. So we have to understand that if we are having a number of rules in if we are having a number of rules which needs to be matched, okay, we have to give priority in the order in which they occur, and priority is given to special case rules over the rules which are more general. So special rules are given more priority as compared to general rules. If we are having something very general, then we do not have to give priority, or the priority is lesser as compared to special rules. Now here a matcher is built so that it eliminates the rules which are more general than the other, and they eliminate rules in different ways. First way is that if the precondition of one rule contain all the preconditions of another second rule, then the second rule is more general than the first. Okay, so based on that, the matcher is built so that it can eliminate the second rule. Now, and the second one is if the precondition of one rule are the same as that of another, except that in the first case variables are there and in the second case constants are there, then the first rule is more general. So if I'm having rule 1 and rule 2, so here if there are variables for the same preconditions, in rule 2 we have constants, then the matcher will be selecting or giving more priority to rule 2 as compared to rule 1, because rule 1 would be considered as more generic. Okay, and the first way is that if precondition of one rule, so if rule 1's precondition has all the preconditions of the second rule, then the second rule is more general than the first. Okay, so if rule, basically if r2, sorry, if r2 is just a subset of R1, then we will consider, we will give more preference to R1 and we will not give preference to R2. Okay, so because we will consider R2 as more general. So based on these two conditions, a matcher is built, and this matcher would be eliminating all the rules which are more general in nature and keeping the specific rules intact. Okay, the next one that we have discussed is if we are assigning preference based on objects. So how do we basically do that? So this is done based on the importance of the objects which are matched, and there is priority matching. And one important thing which happens here is ELIZA test. So we have already discussed about the ELIZA algorithm, but based on those rules or Elizalike rules, there is a test which is performed, which is ELIZA test. Okay, now suppose, let me give you an example. Example is, I know everybody laughs at me. Laughs at me. Okay, so when I'm considering this particular statements, I and everybody are both keywords, but since everybody occurs very rarely, then I, hence Eliza will respond as why, what in particular are you thinking of? Okay, so this will basically have a rule saying that what in particular are you thinking of? Now this is basically, it is giving a preference based on the object which is used. Okay, so if I'm considering everybody, not always everybody is used, right? Everybody means we have to consider everyone which is present, which are present. Now that is very seldom occurs because not everyone has the same mindset, right? So everybody would now be considered as occurring very rarely. Okay, and hence Eliza will be now considering I as the primary object here. Okay, so whenever it is considering I as a primary object, it will respond considering as what in particular are you thinking of. It will not consider everybody, it will just consider I here. Okay, and there is also another form as the function of the position of matchable objects in the current state description. Okay, that is also known as short-term memory loss. So we will not go deeper into that, but just for our understanding that if we are giving preference based on the objects, we have to perform the ELIZA test. And the third one is based on the states. So the third is if we are giving preference based on states. So based on states, there is it is used where several rules are there to fire. Okay, so if we are having several rules, and then fire all of them temporarily and observe the results. Okay, so all the rules needs to be fired. Fire all the rules temporarily and observe the results. Okay, and here we have to use one important point, which is we will use a heuristic function. Use a heuristic function to evaluate the results, and we will be selecting one um, result. We will be selecting one preferred one based on the heuristic function. It is very similar to your best first procedure. We have already discussed this. So best first search procedure, okay, almost similar to it, where we have different rules and we will fire all of them temporarily and we will observe the results, and we will use a heuristic function in order to evaluate results. Okay, so these are some of the points which are associated with rule based systems, and we discussed about 4 important steps, okay, for the success of rule based system. First one, we can go for indexing. Second one, matching with variables. Under this we discussed about the RETI algorithm and also its efficiency sources. Then we talked about complex and approximate matching, which consists of another algorithm which is ELIZA, and we also saw how ELIZA-like rules are. Then we talked about conflict resolution and how this conflict resolution are performed based on objects, rules and states. Okay, rules, objects and states. Yes, so this is all for this session. We will be talking more about this and discuss control knowledge deeply in my next video. Thank you.